Hi, I'm Nigel Baker, and you're listening to The Future Financial Advisor. We're running this podcast to create an avenue for advisors to share their thoughts and their best interests, and really trying to attract those advisors who want to take the industry forward. What we want is great businesses who are really making a difference and really making a big impact to their clients, and we want to know how they're doing it. So in this series, we're going to be discussing the latest digital platforms, some best practices, evidence-based investing strategies. We want to give financial advisors the tools they need to help more investors improve their financial well-being. So if you're ready to take the industry forward, modernise your advisory practice and reach a new generation of investors and the new generation of advisors, then this show is for you.
So all our recordings and podcasts are general advice. All the content, all the people interviewing here, it's all their own opinions and all their own views. In no way does it constitute any personal advice or recommendations. If you need specific advice, please go and seek an advisor. Thanks very much.
So in today's podcast on The Future Financial Advisor, we are really excited to interview Michael Rees-Evans. Now, Michael's been in the industry for over 20 years. He's got a wealth of knowledge across small practices, large practices. He started his own practice at one stage and his own AFSL. He's also actively involved in surf lifesaving. He's a rower. He rows eights as well as surf boats. He plays the trombone. He's in a Welsh choir. I don't know how he has time to do any of this. He's got two daughters and a wife. He's a busy guy. So it's great that he's helped out today. I think you'll really enjoy listening to Michael and his views of the industry. He's now with William Buck in Sydney, which is a very respected and highly regarded financial advice and accounting firm in Sydney and around the country. So a big welcome to Michael, and I hope you enjoy today's show.
All right, welcome today. I'm really excited to have as a guest Michael Rees-Evans. How are you, Michael?
Fantastic. Great to be here. Lovely Northern Beaches office here.
Yeah, thanks for making the trip down. Nice to have a real in-person interview as well.
It is, yeah, after all these years of lockups and Zoom calls, it's great to actually see a person, a human.
Yes, actually this is our first interview in person.
Oh, is it? Oh, fantastic.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
So I've got a few questions here, but the first one I'd like to ask to start off with, and we're going to go into your knowledge and experience around the industry, and I think that's what listeners are here for. But first of all, just tell me a bit about your story.
My story? Gee, that's a potted history, I suppose. Ultimately, a key thing that motivates me is making things better. Yeah. So I started training as a chartered accountant, but I got tired of really being focused on what had happened. Yeah. I was much more interested in what will happen and trying to make that better. Yeah. Moved into management consulting, which is helping make business better. Yeah. And then after a while, I realized that actually I prefer to do that for people, make a difference in people's lives rather than businesses. Yep. So I switched over to financial advice probably in about 2002, about 20 years ago, this year. Yep. And that's really big motivation for me. It's really, I love being able to see where a client is, see where they aspire to get to, and help plan and manage the gap to achieve the goals that are important to them.
Yeah, awesome. And so
I'm a father as well, I suppose. So it's not all about
two daughters.
Two daughters, yeah. They've just finished both at university now, which is fantastic. Row surf boats in the sea, also row the still water at Bosman. I play trombone. Yep. Play trombone just down the road here in Mona Vale, Northern Beaches Symphonic Wind Ensemble, it's called. Good. And I sing in a choir, in the male voice choir in the Welsh tradition. So we sing in Welsh and Greek, German and stuff.
Wow. Where do you find time for all this?
Well, yeah, about managing. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that's great. I mean, I think there's always a story behind everyone, and I'm sure there's more to all those little bits and pieces, but I think it was always interesting to know the person behind the story. But yeah, in terms of the advice industry, you're pretty actively involved, and you've seen all different parts of the industry in your 20 years operating. You've worked in some, for yourself, you've worked in some smaller firms, some bigger firms. Yep. You're about to, or you're now with William Buck, so you've joined a really a well-known, long-standing advisory practice, very well regarded. So, yeah, tell me about your thoughts on the industry and I guess some of the key issues and what you think about that and where we go.
I suppose my introduction to advising was as an advisor authorised by Hillross, which is owned by AMP. Yeah. And although Hillross was a bit more in the independent in the sense of operating, not in the ASIC definition, I got some insights into the influence that a big insto has. Yep. And I thought that was bad for clients. And I'm not really saying AMP was necessarily bad or good, but I just personally felt uncomfortable as being behest of a big insto that was really driven by usually selling their stuff, their products, and they even called the head of advice, the head of distribution. And I thought, hang on a sec, we're not distributors. We're advising clients to achieve their goals. Yep. And we're using financial products where needed. So that was my first introduction, and that was about 2002, and I was a bit uncomfortable with that. And over time, I encouraged the practice to leave to about 2007 to an independent advisory firm, which set up in 2000, probably one of the first sort of ostensibly independent advice practices, Providence Independent Wealth or Provident Wealth Advisory.
Yep.
The trouble with the high net worth is it does leave a lot of the people who aren't there yet or will ever be there.
Yeah.
So it's not your mums and dads.
Yeah.
But it helped me see sort of the difference between sort of an insto mass affluent type of firm versus the independents. But focused very much on high net worth.
Yep.
And so I then did a spell in a trustee company that they call themselves, they were allowed to under the rules, independent trustee company, and I was head of private clients there. And that was quite good because we had a bit of depth, but was actually able to help your everyman, as well as people with significant issues where they need a trustee to manage. And I think all of that led me to think, well, I like the independent idea. And so I then set up my own license after the trust company in 2012 as an independent, and I was called Libertas Wealth Consulting because it was around freedom. So consulting with clients to achieve the freedom they seek, being free from conflicts and helping them achieve the financial freedom thereafter. So that's the play on the Libertas name. So that was great. But the trouble with being a small independent is there's a lot more you can do if you've got better resources. And there's only so much time in the day. So
especially when you're running surf boats and
well, exactly. Well, exactly. You try and manage your time and stuff. Healthy body, healthy mind, and all that. So I then merged with a firm that was sort of part of a big bank-owned license, and I encouraged them to leave the license and move on to the Libertas license, and I kind of sold most of my ownership there, and did that for probably about 5 years. It's interesting between accounting and financial planning. There's my start of my professional life training as an accountant, but I like the forward-looking side of things. And accountants are interesting where they often are helping people go to the future, but your typical suburban accountant is still very much last year's tax return. Possibly maybe thinking if you ask tax advice for next tax return, but they don't really think typically much beyond that. So it was pretty interesting when and I've known William Buck and people from there over the years, and I think I like their blend of having the traditional accounting, but importantly the advisory side as well, helping clients plan and manage their future, and it's quite a good combination of sort of the advice and the accounting. So in some ways it's back to the beginning of my sort of accounting roots, but more importantly looking at the front window, working with a broader team to help. And I think the future advice really, I think is either in the independent advisory practices or places like other professional groups like accountants. Can't really see it with lawyers, but not in the big banks. And I'm really pleased to see that they have recognised that and they're all moving out, because I think that is probably the winds of positive change for the advice industry, is no longer having the banks and the big instos controlling advice as distribution channels.
It's a huge shift, and I think you're right. I think that line-up between the accounting sort of culture and the financial advice culture has gone full circle. The accountants got heavily involved sort of 20 years ago, and then the banks and everyone sort of took control, and almost the accountants almost, I don't know if they gave up, but they just, some big groups got involved, but they almost followed the same model. They missed a trick.
Absolutely, and some of the accountants I've met with over the years, when I particularly set up Libertas and was looking to work with accountants, a lot of them seemed to see financial planning as a great way of getting money for jam, clipping the ticket, which was really jumping on the bandwagon that the big banks were on. And so I agree with you. I think that those sort of people have sort of realised, no, that's not actually money for jam. There's a reason the bank's getting out. And so it's more the people, back more the purist.
It looks like we're getting close. I mean, I think there's a long way to go, but the client first, product last model seems to be now coming through, whereas that's, it sounds like in your experience, you worked in the product guys to start with. You've been seeking that
controlled by the product guys.
You've been seeking that client first journey, and it looks like you're there. But I've been on a similar journey, and it amazed me from early on in my career how the industry just couldn't get away from it. Like it just couldn't get away from that product. And it was really struggled to get there until people whinge and moan about it, but the Royal Commission almost had to come just to clean it up.
That's true. Although a lot of advisors are still very much wedded to product, but not necessarily to sell the product so much as the only value they seem to deliver is linked to the product. So a lot of them charge for their advice based on the amount of product that they manage and control rather than the difference they're making in clients' lives to achieving the outcomes they're after. But I think it's still, as you say, much better, and the Royal Commission has helped drive more consistent behaviours, which is separating a lot more the advice from the product.
Yeah. I mean, anyone in the industry, you don't want a raw commission in your own backyard. But for those that are here...
One, let alone however many we have.
But, for anyone who, wants to be in the industry for the next 10, 15 years, it was sort of a necessary evil, not perfect. And some of the outcomes haven't been great, and we could talk about that for hours. But it is creating a future that I think where the essence is on a much more professional industry going forward. Won't be perfect.
And hopefully, as it gets more professional, they can then swing back on some of the extremely heavy-handed and possibly misguided clients. Not really understanding the thing. So I agree.
Cool. So we move into a bit of the technology now, because part of our belief is that technology in any industry is going to help us serve more people and help people's outcomes. So have you seen? Have you worked much with I suppose any technology providers or operators, or maybe where do you see it going in terms of helping clients and using more technology in your practice?
It's a very big question, and it's hard to answer without rambling. Technology is a key enabler, and I think when I set up my own practice with just sort of one or two support staff and not in the same city as me, technology was a key enabler. So I realised that I didn't really have the capital to get a hold of humans to do stuff. I try to use machines as best as possible, and so the human side was me. And so Xplan was a key one, which is very useful, but is a hard beast to master. I think it's like driving a Ferrari in first gear, and it's very expensive. And a lot of the things that people don't like about Xplan is often around the client view, the interface. I use something called the Astute Wheel, which was originally quite a simple thing, but it's now getting quite complex.
We use Astute Wheel. It's
great. So it's very good. It's much more user-friendly way of getting information from clients and showing them certain simple strategies. So I used to use that a lot.
Used a bit of Wellflow too as well.
So and then more recently, it's been using Wellflow 2, which is, I suppose it's interesting, the old platform technology sort of thing, because traditional platform is a bit more like a box, with Wellflow 2, what I really liked about that. And I used a similar one before called SmartWrap. So SmartWrap was a bit like Wellflow 2, where you had a cash account as a hub, and then you had broker, like your stockbroker who you could place the trades on. You had somebody to do the managed fund side of things.
Is it the premium?
It was on the premium engine, So premium provided the technology for it, and then SmartWrap provided the access to managed funds, which with Wellflow 2 is called New Exchange. Exactly. So I used SmartWrap quite a lot before Wellflow 2, and they were really pricing more like a traditional wrap, and also there's been a lot of change there, and they're sort of moving structures. And Premium now bought them. They were a joint venture, and Premium's bought them. And anyway, the key thing that wasn't available with Premium, which as my practice grew and when I merged, we had a lot more clients, was what's called the managed discretionary account arrangement, which is really where clients give authority to make discretion, so to make decisions using discretion within agreed parameters. And that was, for us, what we found really compelling about the Wellflow 2 technology. Really, it was similar to the SmartWrap, but you actually had that discretion, and it was much more sharply priced. But also, crucially, it had that ability to manage a lot more clients efficiently, which I didn't have on the SmartWrap days. It was still very much an individual one by one, and you had to sort of do the modelling on Xplan, and then you had to get the orders across through into SmartWrap. And then with the reporting, you had to get the feeds from SmartWrap back into Xplan. So it was a bit clunky, whereas with Wellflow 2, you arguably, you don't really need to do any modelling in the Xplan, because you can set it up, the target profiles in Wellflow 2, see them, and if you're happy with them, press a button, which then sends all the order in the background. So it's a much more efficient way of doing things. And also the client interface is very good. The advisory interface is getting better all the time. They're constantly improving and releasing more. So that's a very smart technology. And crucially, we are seeing a lower cost to client, which unlike SmartWrap and some of the other incumbents, where they are still quite pricey for most clients compared to each other.
I think for advisors listening to this, there might be some clients listening to this, but I think the good thing in our lifespan, the prices have come down a lot, and it's only going to get better. And the technology, and I think the outcomes and the experience for clients and advisors are getting so much better. I mean, even a few years ago. And so that's sort of pretty exciting, because it's only getting faster and faster. And as soon as you scratch the surface, there's all these providers that they're trying to solve this.
Yeah.
And not saying they have to be the cheapest, but the technology is getting a lot smarter here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really where do you get the best value add? And to a lot of clients, well, surveys say, not necessarily what I've found, but surveys still say that the most valuable part of the advice value chain is the advisor, it's the human interface.
Yeah.
For many years, that was actually the least paid part. In the old days of 2%, when you kind of, fund managers and platforms, advisors might have got under 0.5% or maybe 0.7%, and yet they're adding the most value, but got sort of maybe a third of the pie, as it were. Whereas now the whole cost of the whole pie has come down. I think, the government in the Gillard days was saying it shouldn't be more than 1%.
Yeah.
And now with low cost access to investments and those sort of things, you can have that cost come down to the client, and yet advisors still being paid a bigger part of the smaller pie. Yeah. Which I think is only good for clients, because we're the ones that help navigate them through the confusing landscape of
absolutely
the financial world.
It is very confusing. We've had, trying to guide people through that whole world is pretty complicated. It's not easy. Yeah.
And it's always changing.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you for that. I've changed tact a little bit now. It's sort of more, it's not just about investing, but, there's lots of noise in the media, whether it's about how much should I put into super, what's going on in the world, what should I be doing, how much do I need to retire? You Google all these topics and it's just a mismatch of communication. The government's got some pretty good sites, but
they're getting better.
Yeah. So you've helped lots of clients, obviously, over the 20 years of advising.
Yes.
How do you talk to clients around that? Because it's difficult to find the right information and to trust it,
Yeah. Finding the right information, I suppose a lot of clients like to hear it from a person they trust. They often trust their friends, barbecues or golf clubs.
The barbecue chat.
Yeah. You get a lot of clients getting advice or guidance from those. But what I always ask them is, well, how well does John know your situation? Does he know when you are looking to retire? Or what you plan to give your children when they get married, when? You can ask a few questions which make them think, oh yeah, hang on, yeah, good point, he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And also, your mates at barbecues and golf clubs only really ever give the good stories. They don't really give there's always a tip and say, crypto is a big one. Which crypto? Oh yeah, I had a mate who made whatever in crypto and stuff. What I try and do with clients is, anybody, clients or not, just other people in a surf club or whatever, is try and get them to focus on the big picture. It's a bit cliche, but it's really, money's a means to an end. What's the end? What are you trying to achieve? Because there's different ways of getting there. Yeah. The job of the news is to sell news. If you say, the market was normal today, it went up. Yeah. And the market was normal today, it went down. Well, it's like, it doesn't sell papers, so they never do that. Soars, it crashes, bloodbaths everywhere. Yeah. That sells news. Their job is to sell news, to sell advertising, to sell viewers. So it's trying to, definitely wouldn't get your information from the news. That's it, I read the news every day. But I find it's a useful, the financial press, I think there's even useful things in there, but I think it's about trying to step back a bit and understand what is the news doing. Yeah. It's not necessarily to inform so much as to attract and to excite and stimulate. Well, stimulate in terms of fear as well as greed. So it's really trying to. Most people haven't got the time and inclination to read things like the Farmer and French paper on investment
why not?
theory.
Why not? It's interesting, right?
Well, I might have had a few actuary clients who might have found that interesting, but even the engineers would have found, no, not my thing. So it's really trying to ideally find a professional that you can trust and use them who knows what you're after and is not trying to flog something, but is trying to help you navigate where you and your family are trying to get to, and try and use that as a trusted advisor. I'm not dissing information sources, but it's very hard. I wouldn't say there's any one information source. Government sites are great, but for information, but it's about how you use information to be valuable to you, and that's the part I think a lot of people struggle with. And over the years, I've had a lot of people that have done things like read The Barefoot Investor and understand the importance of spending less than you earn, saving and having rainy day funds. And they've done a lot of research and reading, and yet they're just not quite sure what they should do with all the information. So I think really there's great information out there, but it's pretty hard to say where you should go. And I'd say try and find someone that you trust. How you build trust, that's another big story. But try and find someone you trust to help you navigate, and just read widely, but just trying to understand the source of information and remembering, importantly, the most easily found source is the media, and their job is to sell eyeballs. So take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, fantastic. That's so true. I think part of the challenge too for advisors who are got great businesses or starting out is that, there's a bit of a, there's obviously a bit of a perception out there that, can you trust financial planners? And there's people like you who, you really want people to access more because you've been around a long time, you've got the right ethics and morals to do this right. So for some of those advisors listening, it's difficult because they know that there's that little bit of a, well, that person's going to think, oh, am I going to be sold? Something like that. The industry's getting better. But I think that's part of the challenge as well for the advisors out there building practices to really work on that messaging and work on to acknowledge the noise in the industry, but to sort of say, hey, we're taking it forward, and this is what we do well. And we acknowledge that there was some bad behaviour in the past, and that's unfortunate, but hey, you're going to be safe here, sort of thing.
I think also linked to that, it's about not being all things to all people. And it works both ways. Clients try to find an advisor. There might be a great advisor that you don't click with. That's fine. And even with advisors, we see a lot of prospects, and not all are appropriate. And you need to be able to get a working relationship with them. And I think trust comes from through that. If you think someone's an idiot, they might be very trustworthy. But if you think they're an idiot, you're not going to work with them. Equally, somebody might be super smart, but if you can't understand what they're saying and explaining, well, they're not for you. So I think it's really not being ashamed or embarrassed by the fact that if you see an advisor who everybody reckons is great, if you don't get on with them, find someone else who is. And the same with advisors getting out there. It's like, well, you don't need to get every person you see to become a client. You need to get the ones that you can work with and add value to, because it's ideally it works best for both client and advisor. It's a long-term relationship. And so it's really, don't be afraid to say no, whether you're the client or an advisor. Don't be afraid to say no, because it's you don't want to say yes, but I'm not really sure, and then it not work out.
Well, it's been really helpful. I mean, I think there's some big issues in the industry. There's people like you who are doing it right and making trying to make the future better than the past, and out there genuinely helping clients and putting them first. As we said, technology helps that, but at the end of the day, for those those complex clients, they do need to speak to someone. It's hard to find the right people, and for people building businesses to find that time, because most good advisors are pretty busy already. So you use technology to make that a bit more efficient and make sure you're a bit more accessible, I suppose. I mean, one of my things in the industry as well, good advisors might only be able to help 50, 60, maybe 100 people. It's not that many people really. So how do you get more people to access someone like you? I'm not saying I want you to work 24 hours a day, but how do you build the technology so that your knowledge and your experience can be out there helping thousands of people? They might not need you every day, but how do they help you? And that's, for me, that's where I think the industry sort of needs to go, to give people access to great quality information. Because when you, as I said at the start, when you go online, you find all sorts of stuff, and you start investing online, you've got these crazy ideas everywhere. And of course, people don't know any better, so they go and hit these CFD trading courses and whatever, so how do you get the right content and information and the right access there? That's not, it's not today, but hopefully that's where we go.
No, absolutely. And thank you for the great work you're doing here. It's really good information that we're going to see come out.
We've a long way to go.
Always is. That makes life interesting.
So last question, if there's one thing you could change in the industry, what would it be?
Two things come to mind, and I'm just trying to narrow it down to one thing. I suppose the two things is it's about the separation of advice and product. But I don't really want to legislate it, because whenever it's legislated, it screws things up for everybody. But it's probably in the advisor's mind to try and separate advice from product, because the product is a means to deliver on the advice to get the outcomes. So it's trying to have that separation. But then the other one actually comes down to dollars, which is kind of ironic, but it's about the difference between cost and value. And I think it's very easy when you're looking at different options to compare costs, because that's a known fact, and you can easily compare it. So it's you've seen a lot with the industry funds with their advertising, and I've got a lot of clients using industry funds I've recommended. So they're great in time. They've got a very good use. But just comparing purely on the basis of cost, I think is unwise. But I understand why the politicians have done that, because there has been the perception that these nasty, untrustworthy planners screw people down and charge too much. But it's really, so I think my answer is probably the one thing I'd like to change is, I have no idea how, is to change the focus from cost focus on value, value for money.
Yeah, good point. Actually, Jim Stackpool asked me the other day about that, the legislation that's been trying to change the retail general advice wholesale criteria. And my response was they should get rid of it all. I mean, the industry, the more you try to put people into boxes, the more it sort of gets even harder for consumers. Like, it's almost like, to me, my analogy was a doctor and a chemist. If I know I've got a headache, I'm going to go to the chemist, right? And he'll probably give me the option, the home brand or the fancy one. That's up to me, And he'll give me some advice around that. So that's, to me, that's like an industry super fund. But if I'm complex and I've had a headache for weeks, I need to go to the doctor. Now, not all doctors are good doctors, and unfortunately, but most, 99% you can probably trust. There's always the odd one that's going to sell you something wrong or operate on you that shouldn't be operating. But
wrong arm or something.
So by getting by getting rid of some of this legislation, I actually think it makes it better, because it actually says these advisors have to be professional, and they're only dealing with clients who need them. And they're looking at that circumstance and saying, how do I help this client? And then I'm going to recommend them a product at some stage. Now, either that's something that they're going to get through me, or they can just go back to the chemist and get that. Whereas at the moment, we've got all these complications, so therefore everyone's trying to do the same thing. Like, so the industry funds are going, well, we can do all these sort of clients, we're allowed to, but that's really confusing. And then the advisors are going, well, but we also want to use your product, but you're trying to advise those same clients. Like, why are we all chasing the same bucket here? Like, it's sort of like, let's make a really clear distinction between if you're in a fund and they want to give you some information about that product, that's totally okay, but that's different to going to a professional who's been helping personal clients for 25 years, who's the doctor,
or even 5 years. I mean, there are some young advisors.
But, you can have a new doctor. I mean, a graduate doctor, totally qualified, but qualified. And so that's the distinction to me. Like, they're qualified, they've gone through all the hoops, and you don't always have to go to a doctor. But some people do and some people don't. Whereas, I think where the legislation still is looking at the old industry, trying to fix the old industry, rather than going, imagine an industry where, let's take a breath, that every financial advisor out there is really professional. And they're not going to do the wrong thing. We've got to take that assumption, right? And so how do we build an industry and legislation around that? Because what they're trying to do is build legislation, in my view, around the past. Go, we don't want people to do this anymore because that didn't work. And we go, well, that's because that was all product-based,
And fundamentally, the big problem with legislation is it doesn't recognise advice. No. Advice is only about financial products. So in the legislation, advice only comes down to product, but most people aren't really asking for product advice. They're actually asking, what shall I do? Should I pay off my mortgage, or put more in super, or put money in an investment? How do I protect myself if things go wrong? So whereas the legislation is all around that. And I think, going to your point about the wholesale, the reason why a lot of people are trying to have clients in wholesale boxes is freedom from the worst aspects of the compliance yoke.
That's right. That's ridiculous, right?
So the problem is, get rid of the compliance yoke for everybody. Everyone's trying to get people to...
Everyone should be on the same page. Every client just needs good advice. Whether they've got $20 million or $1. But the person with $1 might not afford to go to the doctor. That's okay. They just go to the chemist and get their medicine. That's all they need. But the one with $20 million might need a good advisor. There's a lot going on there. Now, it might not be the dollars that make the difference. It might be just the family situation or complexity. We've got a bad headache versus a simple headache. But you get rid of all those hoops, because telling people they require a certain type of advice simply because of how much money they've got, to me, doesn't make sense. That's just weird.
Exactly.
I mean, are you 2.5 million and $1, therefore you're into the wholesale range, but I'm 2.4 million, I don't get wholesale advice? It's just silly.
Or even people I know that were sophisticated investors in terms of ran investment committees and things, and yet now they're trying to get investments of their own choice. But if they don't 2499 instead of 2501, they can't access these. It just doesn't make sense.
So that was my. I think and you've been quite vocal in that space as well, in the media as well, which has been cool. And Michael, I think that's great. Thanks for your time again. Thanks for coming down to sunny Mona Vale.
Pleasure.
I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I'm sure they have, getting your insights and wisdom. Thanks for being part of it. I hope to speak to you again in the future.
Sounds good.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks.
You've been listening to The Future Financial Advisor. So if you've been enjoying the show, please make sure to share it with your network and leave a review on your favourite listening platform. Or if you've got some ideas or thoughts, or would like to come on as a guest, or know someone who would be a great guest, then please let me know. To learn more about Scientium, just go to our website, scientium.com.au, or look me up on LinkedIn. Look forward to speaking with you, and see you on the next episode.